Yes, recording has started. Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to see you. My name is Kiran Bhat, and I'm with Kiran Bhat, who is the founder of the Chakkar. We at the Golchakkar are really excited to sponsor and kind of bring voice to interesting Indian artists who are of Indian origin, but who also challenge our conceptions of literature in our more globalized era. And what an interesting part of the world to also talk about that from Latin America, which is something that I think is very rarely a part of the Indian dialogue. So I'm really excited to have Abhay Kumar and Shelly Bhoil with us to also talk about the different ways that they access Latin America and the world in their literatures. Before we get into that, Karan, would you like to just say some words about the Chakkar?
Thanks, Kiran. Thank you, Shelly. Thank you, Abhay, thank you so much for joining us for this Golchakkar event. It's been a really fun sort of planning these monthly events with Kiran now for almost a year. And this was something that was in the pipeline for a while. Kiran has been telling me about you guys and sort of has been very excited to sort of showcase this particular event. So very happy to have you guys. Yeah, as Kiran mentioned, I edit and I'm the founder of thechakkar.com, which is an Indian arts review. We like to publish a lot of creative stuff, a lot of reviews, a lot of essays and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm gonna let Kiran take over from this. Thank you again for joining, and I hope you guys can, I hope you guys or anyone who watches this, anyone who can share this information, would be interested in in future contributing with the Chakkar, working with the Chakkar, stuff like that. So Kiran, please do take it over.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm also very excited to have these two. I mean, both of them are such interesting artists, and I've followed their work for some time. So I'm excited to be able to talk to them, at least have this moment to have a little bit of an intimate conversation with them. I normally don't like to give people's bios because I would rather have people speak for themselves and introduce themselves, because that's the way that we truly let people speak for themselves. So please, how about when I ask you to speak up, please tell us where you're from, what you write about, but also how you, maybe a little bit about Latin America as well. What is your relationship? First of all, which part of Latin America, which countries or country, and what brought you there as well. So Shelly, why don't we start with you?
Okay. So hello, everyone. Hi, Abhay. It's good to see you after a very long time. I'm Shelly Bhoil. I'm from Himachal Pradesh in India, and I live in Brazil. I came here first time in 2009. I've been here for a long time now. I live in the city called São Paulo, the concrete city, the city of individuals, and yet a very vibrant city called São Paulo. And I am a Tibetologist, and I'm a poet. I think I'm a poet, yeah. And I think it's very difficult to talk about myself, Kiran. Why don't you introduce me? I think I'm done with introduction. I can just talk about other things.
No, I don't know. I don't like to, because I feel yeah, you should give people the space to introduce themselves, and that's enough. I mean, you're a poet, a Tibetologist, a person. You also translate between Portuguese and Hindi, so those are all interesting facts about you.
Thank you, Kiran. Thank you, and you're very generous. You're very generous to give speakers the space. So yeah, basically I'm in Brazil. I live here. I work as a Tibetologist. I work in Tibet House Brazil as a consultant. I translate works from Brazilian Portuguese into English and from English into Brazilian Portuguese. And I'm very passionate about life, and I'm doing some work in the area of Tibetology. And that's all that I do. Now, Abhay has a lot more to say.
Yes, let him speak too.
Well, I mean, I'm a poet and a diplomat. That's all. I mean, I have done a number of poetry collections, edited a few books, and I'm from Nalanda in Bihar, eastern part of India. I mean, for those who don't know. And currently, I'm based in Madagascar, where I work as a diplomat, and my latest book is titled The Magic of Madagascar, which is coming out next month probably in a bilingual edition from Paris. So that's in brief. And I'm also here because I was in Latin America before coming to Madagascar, and I've written a book which is a collection of poems. It's called The Alphabets of Latin America. And I think this is my brief introduction.
Kiran, you have to unmute yourself.
I said, yes, I saw that immediately after. Yes, Abhay is being very humble right now. He's also done a lot of wondrous work as a poet and as a global thinker. But I'll let him and Shelly slowly pass that out over the course of the conversation. Abhay, I wanted to ask you, can you tell us a little bit more specifically with the poetry that you've done in Latin America, which countries in Latin America you spent time in, or significant time in, or lived in, and then maybe actually after that you can also start talking a little bit about what was the process like, dedicating a little bit of a poem, a little bit of yourself to all of the different parts of that continent.
Yeah, so I was based in Brazil, just like Shelly. I was in the Brazil's capital city, Brasilia, for almost 3 years, little more than that, and between 2016 and 2019. And I have also done a book on the capital city of Brazil called The Prophecy of Brasilia, which is also a bilingual edition published by a publisher from Sao Paulo. And also during this period, I also edited a volume called The New Brazilian Poetry, which brings together about 60 Brazilian poets of late 20th century and early 21st century. So besides, I mean, spending time in, most of the time in Brazil, I used to take these short tours.
Oh,
Have we lost Abhay?
Yeah, I think we lost him. But that's a very nice picture to be lost at least.
Yeah.
We'll give him a few seconds, and if, there's no point in engaging.
Kiran, once upon a time, we had difficulties of traffic reaching venues, and now we have difficulties with internet signal.
Right. Or mix of both. Mix of both, I guess. But yeah. Should you talk while we wait for him? Why don't you talk a little bit about your work, and I'll try to spiral back to him. So what brought you to Brazil, and then how does it affect? Like, what are your projects related to Brazil, basically?
Well, what brought me Brazil was marriage. Dilwale Dulhaniya Le Jayenge type of marriage. So, well, I married and I came here in 2009. So maybe I'll talk about how I feel about being in Brazil. When I came here to Brazil, and then I'll talk about my projects. When I came here to Brazil in 2009, what really became a reference point about how I feel here or how I was seen was a TV serial here, a novella called
Abhay sir has come back. I don't know. We decided to give Shelly a chance to speak while we waited for you to.
Yeah, please let Shelly continue. I mean, I will.
And then we'll come back to you. Yeah, sure.
Okay. So when I came here to Brazil, this serial Caminhas às Índias became a kind of a reference point for how I would feel here, how I was seen here. In this novella, there were Brazilian characters who were playing Indian characters, Brazilian actors who were playing Indian characters, and they were wearing Indian clothes. And the story was very much about Indian culture, about casteism, about the relationship between a daughter-in-law, mother-in-law. So, and this series kind of created ideas in minds of people that would just look at me, somebody who's come from India, is newly married, and she has everything about the Indian culture that we want to know. So it was very common at that time to see cars rattling by on high speed with the Bidi Jalaile Jigar Se Piya playing, in the cars at high volume. So Kiran, you are mute. So it was very common to see that kind of thing. So what happened? Like, I was newly married, and I was saying that sindoor and my bangles, wearing bangles. Something that I wore a lot for fashion, because it was only allowed for married women to wear these things, and I was dying to marry to sort of flaunt this fashion. So I was wearing that. So people could recognize that she's from India. So people came up to me with these kind of expectations that, oh, what's your caste? How does your mother-in-law treat you? Does she treat you well? So, I was expected to play Indianness. I was expected to perform Indianness. that was uncomfortable to a point, because you don't want to always be frozen in an idea of India, a very typical traditional idea of India. You expected to sort of have samosas and have the Indian curry at your home, even if you're not doing it in India. You're expecting to have that kind of Indianness about you here in Brazil. So I felt very objectified here in Brazil when I came here, and some of it still remains, because of course, when people, it's not different from how we have it in India. Because in India, when I go to India, people ask me about Brazilian women, and they talk about samba, and they talk about bikini, and they talk about carnival and all of that. So we have it both ways. So I was very, kind of objectified when I came here as an Indian woman who's newly married. But then there are two things that really made me feel at home here eventually, by and by. Two things. One of these things is that as an Indian, by default, you learn survival skills. You become very jugaru. We had this word jugaad in India. Jugaad is you learn survival skills, because India, we have so many ethnicities in India. We have so many nations within India. We have so much language variety in India that you know how to adapt, how to learn, how to find your way. So that really helped me here in Brazil. So all these strangeness that I had in Brazil vis-a-vis the language, I didn't speak any Portuguese, all of that, it all became very, it was difficult initially, because I felt like a child who has to learn from the very beginning, has to learn the letters, the sound of the letters, and in the very beginning. But it was not very difficult because of my Jugaru Indian nature. And second thing that really made me feel very, which made me feel at home here in Brazil, is the fact that Brazilians are very, very accepting people. They open up their hearts to you. They accept you. They say, oh, you speak a little bit of Portuguese, you have a little bit of Shoppy. Like Shoppy is the very chilled beer that they serve Shoppy. And no, you was Jai Brasileira. You're already a Brazilian. So they're very accepting. They don't treat you as a foreigner. After some time, when you mix up with them, and they accept you as one of them. So that really made me feel at home here. So I have been very, very comfortable here. So I should have talked about my projects. I think that is another topic. So I'll get back to that later. Let Abhay finish what he was talking.
And I'm also going to say another. Whenever anyone joins and they're not muted, all the noise of whatever they're doing comes with them. But yes, I just want to react to that before I let Abhay speak, because I can relate a lot to what you say, Shelly. I was in Brazil in 2012 for a few months. I also felt somewhat, not objectified, but at that time, India was mostly known for being poor in Brazilian eyes. So people would always make comments about, oh, India must be so poor, the poverty must be so bad. And I just kept getting annoyed, because I was like, you're living in Brazil, what's your fucking problem? But anyways, yeah, that's another topic. I think maybe when you went, people were a little bit more educated. But for me, it was also, they had Kamosh the India, and that was the only reference point they had to Indian culture, which is like that TV show. So anyways, I had a different response to that. But you're right. I mean, Latin America is much more open-minded, or the West as a whole is more open-minded with a lot of these concepts, because, I mean, it'll take a lot more time in India, I think, before people will accept anything and everything. But anyways, let's let Abhay speak if he's still here. Abhay, are you here? Are you here, Abhay sir? Oh no, he left. It's like bad luck for him, my God. The moment. So why don't you talk about your work, Shelly? You talk about your work, and then we'll reintegrate him finally with everything once he finally is able to attend. You're muted. Let me unmute yourself. Sorry.
Yeah. So I'll continue from where I left, about how I felt when I came here in this country, and how it began to shape my my work, or my literary career, or my orientation as a writer. See, we have it's a tendency for any diasporic community, for anybody who moves out of your country, you want to drift to people whom you know in a foreign country. It's a tendency that we have, like if we are in a sea, we tend to find island, we tend to find places to feel comfortable, feel home at.
Wait,
so
I want to let Abhay speak now, because he's finally, I want him, while he still has internet, I want him to speak. Abhay sir, can you please turn to telling us about your work, please? Somehow.
Yeah, I am having some problems, so it's okay. I think
noticed, because I was literally about to get to you again, and then the connection went, and you left. So please go finish your point about the latter, because I really want to learn about the poetry collection too. So please.
Yeah, so I was talking about the mm, Latin American collection, right? I mean, so I got the opportunity to visit, lots of Latin American countries. I was telling you, and I was writing poems about these places and monuments and people who fascinated me. In fact, I chose to serve in Brazil to write this book. so, uh, so this is I was actually posted to Australia, where you are right now, you know, and and but I chose to serve in Latin America uh, because I was so fascinated by Octavio Paz, who was Mexico's ambassador to India, and Pablo Neruda, who was a career diplomat and served in many countries, including Sri Lanka and Myanmar. And also, I mean, lots of other interesting personalities who fascinated me, about whom I have written in this book. So, so it was sort of a, literary pilgrimage for me. I visited all the three residences of Neruda in Chile, in Santiago and in Valparaiso, and also in Isla Negra. And it was sort of a, so I feel kind of content. I mean, I feel very happy whenever I think of those times I spent in Latin America. And luckily, luckily the book has turned out to be a book which is being celebrated, and it's just been translated into Italian and published into Italian last month, and it is being translated into Spanish and Bangla and Malayalam. So I'm like very fascinated with mm, what I have done, and and feel very good about it.
Yes, as you should, because it's an interesting project of itself. A person of South Asian origin wandering about Latin America and dedicating a little bit of everything to every part of that land. I mean, I want to get more into that as well because I think that's an interesting project. But I want to ask you, Abhay sir, in the moment, if you don't mind. Um, do you also?
Yeah, just I think just Abhay is fine. Drop the sir part.
Yes, 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 Mister. All right. Sure.
Okay.
I just want to ask you though, like, do you also feel, because Shelly, before we were trying to pull it back to you again, was talking a little bit about the performative aspect, or kind of like the cultural aspect of being an Indian origin person in Latin America, and the somewhat difficulties of that, as well as, I mean, not necessarily difficulties, but having to deal with the exoticisms and the way people see you as this kind of certain figure. What was your experience with that? Like, did you also have to kind of deal with people over exotifying you, or kind of seeing you in a very particular light?
I mean, I think, not really, because India is a place, which is fairly well known in Latin America. As Shelly was saying, there was this serial, Caminos das India, which had, already been telecast when I arrived in Brazil. I think it was being re-telecast that time. But I mean, of course, I mean, Camino das India is, it has a particular way of looking at India. But much before that, in fact, when I was there, uh, I also got translated A.K. Ramanujan's folk tales, which he gathered from Karnataka and published into Portuguese. And what I realized that many folk tales from Panchtantra were already translated, and Brazilians and Latin Americans were familiar with India's folk tales. Also, works of Tagore, in fact, have been translated widely in Latin America, both in Spanish and Portuguese. And also, the major, they were aware of Salman Rushdie's work, and they followed quite, I mean, there was a Brazilian writer, if you know her, her name is Cecilia Meirelles, and she came to India in 1950s and wrote a number of poems about India, and a whole book of poems called Poemas Escrito na India. So Octavio Paz, of course, wrote In Light of India, about which is one of my favorite books, all-time favorite books. It sort of distills the essence of Indian culture. So whether it be food or literature or epics, I mean, he's one of the most fascinating or most charming essayists I have ever come across. So these were already with there with Latin Americans. Of course, Pablo Neruda was also he had served in parts of Asia, and so I did not see that, I mean, there was this scope of looking at India in an exotic way. And I mean, when I arrived in Latin America, I mean, Latin America already knew a lot about India.
I just like to add something that Abhay said. I'm so sorry to intervene before I'm misunderstood. When I talk about how I felt I was sort of made an object of people's fantasies about India, that was in relation to not the circle of intellectuals, because we have Indian studies in Brazil. Kiran, you are mute. We have Indian studies in Brazil, and when I came, I connected to the University of São Paulo, so there I did not have the same experience. There are people there who are already doing their PhDs on Amitabh Ghosh and a lot of Indian authors. So just wanted to clear this.
It was interesting. I was thinking something similar, because I think all three of us have entered Brazil in Latin American ways. I came as a backpacker. So for me, it was like I interacted with other like young 20-something backpacker types. And again, who are not like educated, but it's good. It's also important to recognize what Abhay is saying, which is also a very factual point, which is that ever since Tagore came and made wonderful connections in Argentina, all this, there has been this interesting link between Latin America and India that has not been very explored, on a global scale. People don't really talk about it or think about it. So I think it is an exciting little connection, but there's also a difference, like sometimes as Shelly said, and also maybe being a woman as well, that might also affect it in certain ways too. I mean, it is certainly different, but yeah. Shelly, why don't you talk a little bit about your own writing in relation to, or if you also want to talk more about being exotified, that's also fine. But I mean, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you're writing out of a Brazilian context, how Brazil inspires or affects your writing?
Yeah, so I was talking about this, in fact. So what happens, like when we go to a foreign country, the tendency is to move into your own people, to sort of make your own island of comfort, I believe when I came to Brazil, I became more Indian than I was when I was in India. Because of two factors. One factor, I just said that it just became a reference point for people to look at me, talk to me, question me, query me. By people, I mean the commoners, because I moved a lot, not only in the intellectual circle at University of São Paulo, but also common people in the streets, in the restaurants, and I connect a lot with people, the people at the grassroots, So what they talked about, and what I myself as a foreigner felt here, the tendency to move into your own internets, to stick to people around you. So what happens, I begin to create my own little India here in my writings. So the poems I wrote at that particular time, that published in 2016 in my poetry book collection. So in these poems, I see there were a lot of themes that were related to India, the social issues, be it sati system, be it marriage, be it dowry, be it about our caste system, a lot of things that is issues in the Indian culture. They became more closer to me when I was here in Brazil. Even there was long distance nationalism. When the Nirbhaya case happened, I was so traumatized about it. I was so traumatized. I wrote a poem about it, which won one of the prizes in Rabindranath Tagore poetry contest in India. So I wrote about these issues. So this is one thing. Then on the other end of the spectrum, there's another thing, that is that you want to belong to a place where you're living. And when you're not living there temporarily, but when you're living there for good. Kiran, I want to belong here. I'm here in Brazil. I'm living here in Brazil. My son is born here, and I have no plans of moving out of here as of now. I'm settled down here. So I want to belong here. So this impacts my writing. This impacts my orientation of what I do, what I write, So these kind of things, not only you see in the poems that I write, the poems that I've published, my concerns have changed. Not that India is no more a part of me. In fact, I'm more Indian than I was when I was in India, because now I can see India from outside. I can see it subjectively as well as objectively, right? So, but at the same time, I also want to belong to this country. And to belong to this country, what is very, very important is language. Kiran, like to have a functional knowledge of Portuguese will just help me move around, right? But as a writer, I need to have a better understanding of the language. So I'm taking right now, working on my Portuguese, I'm taking it from an intermediary to an advanced level. And my plan is that I am right now I'm translating some Indian women poets into Brazilian Portuguese. Rather than translating from Portuguese into English, if I'm able to translate from English into Portuguese, right? Because when we talk about poetry, we don't talk about the literariness of the words. Words have metaphorical meanings. Therefore, you can imagine the kind of proficiency we need to do this kind of a thing. And if I'm successful in publishing these books, then I'll tell you these poems that I translate from English into Portuguese, then I can say that I then belong here. So this is what I'm doing. So language is very, very important for me, and I'm really trying to learn a lot more Portuguese, just not functional, just not intermediate, but much deeper. Because otherwise, it's not very difficult for me. I would say it's not too difficult to translate some Brazilian poems into English. I can do that. But then we need to also not translate any poems, and we need to translate poems that have that depth. And to understand that depth, you need to really understand the language, the culture to get to that depth. See, if I were a painter, I would not talk about language, right? Because then for painters, visuals is the language, right? What they see is the language, right? Language is non-worded language. But for writers, language is very important. So that's what I'm doing. So on one hand, I have my mini Indias here. On the other hand, I have this kind of a Brazil seeping into my literary orientation. My orientation as a writer, in my works as a writer, as a translator. And also one thing that I'm doing is, since I'm a Tibetologist, I'm a scholar in the area of Tibetan studies, and we don't have much here in Tibetology. So I am trying to bring that here. So this last semester, I gave classes at University of São Paulo on Tibetan literature. And now I am working on an anthology of Tibetan poems in Brazilian Portuguese translation, which will be published at the University of São Paulo. In fact, when I met Abhay in Brazil in 2017, I guess, Abhay, right? So I said to Abhay that why don't we bring Indian poets to Brazil? Why don't we translate and make a team of people and translate Indian poems into Portuguese? And he said that I already have a collection, and that was being translated into Irish at that time. And he said, I have this collection and we don't need to collect. I have this collection. I said, yeah, let's do it, And then I think I'll let Abhay speak about his 100 great Indian poems, commendable project, which was a huge success here. So that's what I'm doing here. And that's how being in this place, living in Latin America, is shaping my literary sensibilities. I'm trying to really get deeper into it through the connection of language.
And that's an amazing thing that you're going to do, because the idea of bringing, like, say, South Asian poetry into Latin America itself is such a valiant effort, and it'll help bring more of a sense of what South Asian culture means to this part of the world. I want to hear also what Abhay is doing in that regard as well. Like, what do you think is, with your curation efforts, with your poetry as well, what do you think is the bridge that you're trying to build between Latin America and South Asia?
Well, I have
also the multilingual.
Yeah, as I shared earlier, that I have already done, as Shelly said, that 100 great Indian poems which I have edited has been translated into Portuguese and Spanish, both languages. And Spanish was the Portuguese edition was published by the University of Sao Paulo. Shelly played a key role in getting that done, and then it was published by University of New Mexico. University of University in Monterrey in Mexico. So it has been such a long time now. I'm like getting, forgetting the names of the universities. So so that was for the Indian poetry to be published into both Portuguese and Spanish in Latin America. So, and this 100 great Indian poems, this book contains poems from 28 Indian languages, and covers a span of 3,000 years of Indian poetry. So this is the first anthology of such kind which have been translated into both Portuguese and Spanish. So that was a way to build a bridge between India and Latin America through poetry. Then, as I shared earlier, that I also translated myself the works of 60 Brazilian poets from Portuguese into English, and this book contains those poets who were not covered by the anthology edited by Elizabeth Bishop. So these are new Brazilian poems, and this book is available in India as well. It's available on Amazon. So it was sort of bringing Brazilian poetry to India. So this is I wrote about Cecilia Meirelles and how she played a key role in building a bridge between India and Brazil. I have written poems about Octavio Paz and highlighted his role in building this India-Latin America connection. So I think then there was also this translation of A.K. Ramanujan's folk tales from Kannada into English and English into Portuguese, which was published during my stay in Brasilia. Also, I wrote, as I told you, I wrote poems about Brasilia, the capital city of Brazil, which sort of I've left behind. And Shelly is doing a good work. We also had, I think, a number of Indian writers participating in a festival of Indian literature, which included 5 key writers from India visiting Brazil during my stay there. So I think these are the literary bridges we have built during the past 3-4 years. I'm sure that many more bridges will be built in the future.
Shelly brought up a very interesting point that I think is also worth bringing up, which is this what it means to belong, or what it means to want to create something for a nation. But when you write or when you create things, are you trying to write, when you think of the parts of the world that you want to contribute to, do you think like, I want to write things on behalf of this part of the world or that part of the world? Or do you think that you're writing from a different place? Unmute yourself, because I muted you. So please unmute yourself. Sorry, I muted you again. I was trying to unmute you and then I unmute. Sorry. They should just let you be able to completely unmute yourself as the host. Just press the unmute button again. I won't touch it for now. No, you're still muted. Why are you muted? Oh my God, I'm so sorry. You're mute. Yeah, now, no, Shelly is unmuted now. Abhay, can you please unmute?
Unmute yourself.
Yeah. Oh no. Did I incidentally silence you forever? Oh my God. I'm so sorry. Unmute yourself. Oh, or maybe come back in and out. Maybe that'll help you. I'm so sorry. Oh my God. I've never had this happen before where the person is unable to unmute. Just unmute. Let me see if I can press ask to unmute and that'll help. Yes. Oh no, that's Prabhanjan. No, I don't want him. Yes. Sorry, I keep muting people because what happens is when a lot of people are unmuted, someone else is talking, it just echoes back. So then I was trying to get rid of that. But now Abhay still might be. Can you maybe, yeah, whatever you've said now has just been not working. So please. You're unmuted finally. Okay, yeah, speak.
Yeah. So I mean, what was your question? Can you repeat again?
There's been so much, yes, belonging and like the act of writing on behalf of a country. Do you believe that you're writing for the sake of Brazil or for India or for any place, or do you try to write from another perspective?
But not really. I mean, I'm not writing for either Brazil or for India. I mean, I'm writing for writings. Writing for myself, to remember, and and writing to sort of, not sort of, but writing to to reflect what I think about, how I see Latin America, or how I see. I mean, how I see, for example, certain person or certain place. For example, there is this short poem called about a bookshop in Argentina, Buenos Aires, El Ateneo, which is the largest, one of the most fascinating bookshops in the world. And I have a poem. It's called "Tango Dancers Turn into Books, Dazzle as Diamonds in the Grand Golden Crown of the City." So it's my way of looking at, looking at the bookshop. Here's a poem about favelas, party-colored islands in the sea of an indifferent humanity, suffering, celebrating the carnival that is life. Or a poem about Gabriela Mistral, which is one of my favorite poems, and it happened accidentally, which is basically a rewriting of her poem called After Dame la Mano, or Give Me Your Hand. Read me your poem, and we shall float freely across the cosmos like a comet. Read me your poem, and I will be blessed like a butterfly, drunk on nectar. We shall drink the same verse from the fountain of the universe, like two hummingbirds in mid-air, like two hummingbirds, nothing more. You are swift wind, and I am a fearless horse, and we shall leap together to the moon, because we are two bodies, but one soul, and nothing more. So these are some of the ways to look at Latin America. I see Latin America from a different perspective. I look at it from a position of difference, in the sense I'm not an insider, and that, I think, that makes it interesting to give it a fresh perspective through my poems.
Very true. Yes, we're always almost, well, regardless of the land, it's always an element of outsider as an artist, right? We are always kind of looking from our eyes and then perceiving the earth.
What about you? What about you, Kiran? You have not shared your experience.
Oh, well, I'm the moderator. Why should I be sharing my experiences?
I'd like to say something.
Yeah, let's
Kiran's work that published in Brazilian Portuguese has been shortlisted for Jabuti Awards, which is very, very prestigious. And Kiran, you really, really make me proud as an Indian in Brazil. You make me proud, really. Well done.
Many congratulations, Kiran.
Not living in Brazil, but his work is shortlisted.
Abhay and Shelly also make me proud. Really. No, really, I think, Abhay, so your Earth Anthem is such an interesting concept, and I think a lot of your ideas are really interesting, and I'm really excited to see as you develop them and move them forward, where they'll go. And Shelly, I think it's beautiful, the work you're doing, like the idea of, it's something I'm also interested in right now, because I'm working on certain indigenous writings like mine, Susil, Sitsal, Chol, I'm translating them into English, and just for fun, I started writing them in Kannada as well, and it was so fun, and I enjoyed it. And I was like, maybe I'll also translate this into Kannada. It's kind of interesting. The idea of also bringing indigenous Chiapan writing from these very perspectives into Karnataka, and I was even thinking of
Wonderful.
no, but you're doing the same thing in Brazil, so it's not. So you get this too. So it's like
do that because I understand. I'm also working on some indigenous people here. They're writing the culture, their works, and I tell you that I don't want to talk about that, but I understand what it is to facilitate other people. One thing is to be a poet, to be yourself, so and so. And the other thing is to facilitate
and it's
other
very
people.
important. It's very important because we bring together, when we help the community, we help all of us, and we even help ourselves.
Yes, and to get that sense of satisfaction, that richness only belongs to you. Only you understand that richness, what it is,
We can only, but yes, people, I think it's something that people don't realize is that when we're bringing a community forward or we're helping the world, we're doing much more than just writing. And I think all three of us have interesting projects that work on that. So thank you for your acknowledgement. I appreciate it. I'm just the moderator. I don't want to get involved. I'm here to listen to you and to take advice and to learn from you two right now. So the other way can happen if and when you decide to have a video with me. But right now I want to learn from you two. And I wanted to ask one last question to Shelly before we start taking the Banjan's question, which was about belonging as well. Like, when you see the future of these literary terms, do you also believe that you and your work will be a contribution towards Brazil or India, or all of it, none of it? How do you identify with your work in relation to contribution and the national trajectory of contribution?
Well, Kiran, I'll tell you something. My work, what I do, I see it as just a tiny particle. It's just like, Earth in relation to the universe. So if I see it in relation to the world literature or contribution, it's just a very tiny particle, but it's a very, very important and significant one. Especially the work that forget my poetry. I'm very excited, but I would like to mention that my poems are publishing in Brazilian Portuguese. My anthology is forthcoming, and I'm excitingly waiting for the launch of my book here. But then more I like to talk as a facilitator. So the works in Tibetology that I bring here to Brazil, the way I facilitate the translation of Tibetan poems into Brazilian Portuguese and bringing Tibetan writers here, I think it's huge. It's very significant. It's very important because when here again, I'm talking about not the people in the intellectual circle, talking about lay people, right? So when I tell them that I'm a Tibetologist, they say, "What is Tibetology?" What is Tibetology? I explain that it's the culture, the language, the literature of the people who belong to a country that's occupied, and the Dalai Lama is in exile. Oh, the Dalai Lama! So Dalai Lama is the only reference point to talk about Tibet. And then when they talk about Dalai Lama, they talk about only Buddhism. They hardly that people would understand that they are displaced, they are dislocated, and Brazil is really good when it comes to receiving refugees. This country is very receptive, it's very warm. So I think when I talk about the Tibetan writers, their exile, their situation, their condition, and what it means for them to be dislocated and having no hope of return, but yet hoping against the situation. So that really people do feel that it kind of connect chords. So this, I think, is very meaningful, this work that I'm doing about facilitating Tibetan writers' presence here in Brazil. And then, as I mentioned about, I'm translating, and I just published Arundhati Subramaniam's 2 poems in my Brazilian Portuguese translation. So that will also enable people to see Indian women in another light, not necessarily as a woman who's weak and who's meek and who's subdued. Of course, that is also there about Indian women, but that's not the only thing about Indian women. So I think this is a very significant contribution to talk about Indian, because normally, when we have ideas of culture, I do not know why it's always related to women. Women becomes at the center stage. Like women, for example, we talk about Brazil in India. Some people in India have told me, "Oh, you're in Brazil, so you probably don't need to wear clothes." I said, "What? You save money on buying clothes?" "What?" "Yeah, because women don't wear clothes there." I mean, what the hell, that kind of perception. So the lay people have that kind of perception, and always women is always a target. So therefore, bringing Indian women poets here in Brazilian Portuguese translation will make a lot of sense. And not only this, even taking Brazilian women poets to India through translation will be very helpful in understanding that how Brazilian women, they're not all about the samba and carnival. They are a lot more than that. They're doctors. For example, I just recently translated and just published, I co-translated with Virna Teixeira. She's a neurologist, she's a doctor, she's a publisher, she's a writer, she's a poet. She's also editor of a journal. So she does so many things, and she's such a vibrant, such a strong woman, and her works are so interesting because of her works, they relate to LGBT community, and they're so different, and very interesting, something that I've never seen before, a very new perspective that I gained through translating her poems. And her book just published, and I've translated most of the poems in the book. So I just feel it's an important work that I'm doing, though I see that my contribution or what I do, it is as good as the earth, tiny earth, छोटा सा गोला है ना, इतने बड़े ब्रह्मांड में, इतने बड़े यूनिवर्स में छोटा सा गोला है ये, लेकिन ये इम्पोर्टेंट है.
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल.
Kiran,
Yeah, I was saying. I just mute myself to avoid noise. Yeah, what? But yeah.
Would you like me to read some of my poems?
Yes, I want you to read a poem. Read one of your poems, please. Yes, like Abhay has. Please read one of your poems because I would love to hear it as well. Go ahead.
So I assume that the audience of this event is in India, not Brazilian. So instead of reading I would have loved to read a Brazilian Portuguese poems, like maybe Arundhati Subramaniam's poem that I translated and that just got published. But let me read a poem in English.
Yeah,
it's
sure.
called Masala Chai in Brazil. This poem won the one of the awards in All India Poetry Competition in 2016, Commendation Award. So Masala Chai in Brazil. So here you will see everything that I talk about: belonging, non-belonging, translation, and how you will see that one of the lines from Bossa Nova, one of the Brazilian songs, becomes translatable towards the end. At the beginning, it's quite oppressive to me. It sounds oppressive to me all the time, the Portuguese, but then how it becomes translatable, and I begin to feel at home here. It's called Masala Chai in Brazil. My kitchen is a little India, is an island, invaded by aromatic waves of roasted coffee beans, riding on strums of guitar played on my neighbor's radio in Brazil. A vida vem inondas como mar, colonizing me from tongue root tension to begin with, at AMs and PMs every day. I take refuge in my masala chai that tickles the Indianness on my tongue and brings in the Lata or the Mukesh. Kahin dur jab din dhal jaye, between the slow slurps from a Chinese mug, Sanj ki dulhan, reflection of the setting sun, thrown into the golden tinge of turmeric stewed with tea leaves. Chupke se aaye, stealing between my mother's secret condiments, and oh, the divine basil she watered by the waking eye of the sky, clad in a sari like Asha Parekh in the song Main Tulsi Tere Aaye, often hummed in our fragrant courtyard until time fell us apart. A dried leaf or two I pick up and brew in my tea every day at AMs and PMs, sometimes over long distant calls on long dead phone numbers, ringing deep into the sips from a mug of masala chai that keeps me warm like the fur of my mother's embrace on cold days and nights, flipping over and over on my isolated island, a little India invaded by aromatic waves of roasted coffee beans, riding on strums of guitar, a vida vem inondas como mar, which means life comes in waves like it were the sea, played on my neighbor's radio in Brazil.
You should do theater, Shelly. Like, you'd be really good in
Thank you.
I know.
I have the time to do many things. I have to settle with what I can in my limited time period.
We should all.
Thank you, Kiran.
No, but the theater was the aspect of the singing was so fun as well. It was a very fun little performance. I liked it. I almost
Thank you.
could end on that because that was such a nice way to end. But I will, because Prabhanjan had a good question. I think we should talk about it. In regards to fiction writing, how is fiction writing in Brazil? Is it something that I'm sure? Well, yes, yes, a lot of people write fiction in Brazil. But can you talk a little bit, maybe? Or yes, and yes, maybe I'll ask Abhay right now to go because he's not had some time to speak. So, but maybe also you can talk about Madagascar because that's a country we never think about, and I'd be curious to learn about the literary scene there as well. So, tell us a little bit about Brazil and Madagascar if you can.
Fiction writing in Brazil is, doing pretty well. Brazil has some of very talented fiction writers. And one of my favorite writers is Machado de Assis, who is founder of the Brazilian Academy of Literature, and his book, I would highly recommend his book called Posthumous Memoirs of Brás Cubas, which is such a fascinating read. It looks like that it's been written in contemporary India, in fact. So. Also among the contemporary Brazilian writers, there are a number of them who are well known. I would, but I would recommend, Clarice Lispector, who is also known as the Dostoevsky of Latin America, a 20th century writer. And I would highly recommend her work. I mean, she's no more, but I would call her a contemporary because in fiction, decades hardly matter. So also, Shelly would recommend more. But about Madagascar, Madagascar has also a number of, very talented fiction writers. And most of them, in fact, they live in Paris actually, or in France, different parts of France. Some of them live here. Michel Rakotson is one of the writers whom I would recommend. Also, the contemporary contemporary fiction writers, whose works have been translated into English. There are a number of them, but the issue is that Madagascar, the language here is French. So what a reader will get to read is a translation, and there are not too many translations, but there are just a few. So that's a challenge. But most of the Malagasy writers, they live in France and write in French.
Yes, that's interesting. There's a really wonderful Madagascan writer from the 20th century, Jean something rubber. Anyways, but yes.
Jean Joseph Rabieri Velo. Yes. He was a poet. He was Africa's first modern poet.
He's amazing.
And JJR, JJR was. His work is still widely read, and he is the tallest literary figure in Madagascar. And I have read his book. Books of poetry, and I'm planning to write about it once I get some time, because his poems, as I was suspecting, because Madagascar is a beautiful place, and I was suspecting that his poems should have stars and the sky and the beautiful flora and fauna of Madagascar. And to my surprise, they are full of them. And his poems, some of his poems, some of his work has been translated, but I would like to do my own translations, and hopefully someday. But that's like, that's a project, that's a dream project I have, hopefully, which I can take up in the future.
Yes, and it just goes to show you there's so many corners of the world with really beautiful writings that just need more exposure, and your work will absolutely help us with that. Shelly, now tell us about
Right.
modern. Yes, yes. Shelly, tell us more about modern Brazilian novels, or like what are the youngsters now doing that are exciting?
Yeah, Kiran, before I talk about the modern Brazilian writers, let me just talk a little bit about the fiction here. When we talk about fiction, we talk about how it started. And Brazil was also a colonized country like India was. A lot of literature and fiction, in particularly, came out of this confrontation with the colonial forces, and a lot of colonizers here are now settlers here. So how they negotiate with their legacies, their colonial heritage, as well as their now native Brazilian heritage, which is a new native heritage, I would say, and the relationship with the indigenous people here. So we have a lot of that. Now to come to talk about the contemporary scenario, contemporary Brazilian fiction, it deals a lot with city life. A lot of people, they move to the cities in search of livelihood, as now we do in India. वो मेरी एक friend थी, Vani, she was working for NDT, no, she was working for Star News. So she said कि तू क्यों उठा के यहाँ पे शहर में आ गई है शिमला से? I was living in Shimla, तो शहर से यहाँ पे गांव से शहर आ गई अपना मुंह उठा के. I'm just jokingly. So we have this tendency to leave our countryside, and then countryside only becomes a backdrop in your life, and then you come to city, and then you are in confrontation with what city brings to you. So a lot of these novels that you would read here, contemporary novelists, you will find in them the confrontation with this kind of city life, its loneliness, violence, and the political drama, the political issues, and also the media control. A lot of these things will surface. Now, just to maybe name some writers that I would recommend, and these are João Gilberto Noll, Milton Hotman, Bernardo Carvalho, and Adriana Lisboa. She's very good, Adriana Lisboa. So these are some writers I would recommend.
Wonderful, thank you. And maybe later send me a message about them, because I might be interested in getting to know their works privately. But for now, we're more or less out of time. I apologize for all these random mishaps with the microphone and then the connections, but what can we do? It's just how it is. And I'm sure Madagascar probably doesn't have good internet at all, given where it is in the world. But anyway.
Not really. I mean, Madagascar has one of the best internet connections in Africa.
Oh, that's crazy.
And it may be today maybe some issue, but generally it's very good connection.
That's good, yeah, because my experience has been with island countries like Indonesia, Philippines, is they usually have some of the worst connections in the world because and then being in Africa and an island country, I thought. But
I just feel I so envy Abhay, I so envy you, I so envy people who live on islands, these places, because there you might not have that great connectivity with internet and the world, but you are so connected to the elements of existence, the earth, the nature. So I so envy both of you, please.
Yes, but Brazil also is an enchanting country with a lot of beautiful nature. So, but you're in Sao Paulo. I mean, I love concrete jungles, so maybe I'm biased, but.
Kiran, maybe anybody else has any questions?
Yes.
No.
Do we have any last questions before we finish up? I'll give a second, and if not.
Yeah, I mean, so I see you are using University of Melbourne's.
Yes. They give me free.
Zoom.
Well, thank you everyone for coming, and this is the end of the recording. Please follow us on thechakkar.com, and please subscribe to our different newsletters and YouTube pages. Thank you.